What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is Dawg Talk with your host, Holden. Glad to be here today and glad to have you guys back. It's hard to believe that we are already getting ready and kicked off on another season of Dawg Talk here. I want to start things off just by saying thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for tuning in every year. Again, hard to believe that this is already the fourth season that we have been doing the show, coming to you guys. In the last 4 seasons, it's been awesome. We started things off the COVID season, and it's also hard to believe that it's been that long since we've had that year of COVID. Kind of scary to think. It's really not scary to think, to be honest with you. It's kind of just one of those, thank goodness that's hopefully behind us. I'll knock on wood a little bit because we just don't want any part of that coming back. But I'm glad that you guys are back here. We're up and running on YouTube. Usually I don't get started with YouTube for quite a while. Usually I don't start until the start of the season. We got 44 days till we kick off as I'm recording this on Thursday night. Most of you guys that listen or watch over the next couple of weeks, you can obviously do the math as far as changing things up to see exactly when it is for you guys then. Because obviously that changes as days go. When I put this out, is generally on Friday mornings. So this, at that point, we're going to be at 43 days, counting until we get to that first game of the season. So we've got a few things on tap that we're about to get into today. Obviously, SEC Media Days has been a big conversation, and it's been all that's been going on this week. So that's going to be the bulk of what we're talking about here, is more or less more leaning on what Kirby spoke of. We're not going to dive too deep into Brock Bowers and Kamari Lassiter and Cedric Van Pran that were all at Media Days as well, because when it comes to players, they are taught very smartly, and Kirby in the same way, keep everything tight to the chest. But we've got a bunch of fun stuff to talk to you guys about. As usual, you guys make sure that you follow us on Twitter at Dawg Talk 20. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, Dawg Talk 20 as well. There on YouTube that we are up and running on, and I'm glad to have the YouTube channel back up and running again. For it to be this early is just kind of, it's not really a surprise as much as it's just new. I'm trying to get all the visual stuff rocking and rolling first thing, because I know a few of you guys do like to watch it over on YouTube. So I want to make sure that I get that content as best as I can out to you guys. One new thing that I did start this week, and I'm going to try to continue to plug that this year and this season, is I started a Patreon. So if anybody wants to support the show, I'm going to leave that link in the description every week as we have an episode, but it's just patreon.com/Dawg Talk 20, just as it is on Twitter and everything else that you would follow or search for. Just if you want to support the show, there's a link there that allows you to give a donation to the show monthly. If you guys don't necessarily want to do that, that's fine too. But you can go and check it out if you think it's too steep. That's fine. I think eventually in the future I will find where I can give you more content and have another tier. Right now it's just supporting the show. All that does is allow us to do the show and continue to put that out to you guys. Again, I've done it for 4 seasons without really getting a lot of donations in on it, and I'm continuing to do it. But again, having new audio and stuff like that and trying to get the visuals and make sure that the visuals look good and all that good stuff, it takes work. It takes a lot of doing. So I want to make sure that I give you guys the opportunity. If you guys want to support the show, I will 100% shout you out and let you know, let everybody know how thankful I am for you guys doing that if you guys want to do that. But business is out of the way. Let's start talking about some Georgia football, man. I'm excited about it. Kirby Smart took the podium earlier on Tuesday for SEC Media Days. All of SEC Media Days at this point is pretty much over. It's talking season. That's all there is to it. That's what we've been working on coming up to this point. Hunter and I talking about things last month. It was gearing up for talking season, which is what was coming, and that's what's here. It's hard to believe. Again, we're only 44 days away from the start of the season, which seems like a long time. But in the grand scheme of things, we're going to fly through a month, and then all of a sudden we're like, hey, we're 2 weeks out. That's all it's going to be. We're gonna fly through this next month, and we're going to be looking at 2 weeks before we start the season. I'm fired up about it. I do want to give caution and put caution in the wind as we get started in this season, just because we're going to do SEC predictions. We're going to do all of that in the coming weeks. I don't want to cram everything into this episode, but I want to make sure that we're all kind of tempering expectations. All the expectations right now are to go undefeated, back-to-back-to-back national champions as a three-peat, something that hasn't been done since the early 30s. It's been a long time since this has been done, or what, like 1936, maybe not necessarily early 30s, but regardless, long time ago. A lot of teams have tried to do that since then, and it just hasn't happened. The latest of which was a team that Kirby Smart was on in Alabama back that 2012-2013 season. Alabama tried to do it, couldn't do it. And we're not going to dive deep into that and talk too much about that because you know how we feel about that here on this channel. But it's something that has not been done in a long time. And Kirby spoke a little bit about that on the podium, kind of coming into things, taking questions and whatnot. And that's just something that we're going to not necessarily try to harp too much on. Is it going to be exciting if it happens? Yes, but as Kirby said, we got a long way till we get there. Right now, we need to temper expectations and just be happy where we are. The fact that last year, after winning the national championship, we could sit back and go, hey, we're the national champions for the first time in nearly 40 years, or over 40 years at that time. We're the national champions. How awesome, how exciting is that to be that, and then to do it again last year? Unbelievable, considering how long it had been since we had won the previous, again, before last year. Now getting into back-to-back national championships, it just blows your mind. So now I'm not saying that Georgia's about to lose a football game this week or anything like that, or this year, but I just want to temper the expectations and make sure that everybody enjoys the good old days while you're in the good old days, because we're in them. Georgia, back-to-back national champions. Let's be happy about it. Even if you don't win it this year, let's still be happy about what's been happening. And Georgia's not going anywhere. That doesn't mean that you're going to win the national championship for the next 10 years straight. Would that be awesome? Yes, but the possibility of that happening is very, very astronomical, completely unbelievable if something like that was to happen. So we have to understand that things are going to change, teams are going to change, outfits are going to change as far as, your teams. One thing that Kirby talked about is retention, which we're going to get into all of this here in just a minute. I'm going to kind of take it step by step, kind of how Kirby went through his press conference, and we're going to talk about those things. But I just want to make sure that we're not all fired up on the point that Georgia's about to go 15-0 again, and then next year we're going to go 15-0 again, and then the next year we just got to take it easy. Hey, deep breath. Georgia's had two really, really good seasons. And it's hard to come off of last year and go, man, we can do it again, because Georgia lines up really, really well to do it again this year. But if they don't, I don't want a lot of people, just being heartbroken about it. The fact that Georgia couldn't win it this year, when, again, we've won it the past 2 years. That's a big deal. So let's take in on that moment and be excited for what has happened in those times. So let's kind of get into some of the press conference that it's not really a press conference. You guys know what it is. It's SEC Media Days. It's coaches talking, taking a few questions here and there. We've got our mantra for the season. You know how it's been the past couple of years. Kirby's come out with, like last year, Georgia will not be hunted. We'll be doing the hunting. We've got a new mantra that we're going to come into this year. But let's start off right here. One of the big points that Kirby talked about, and I've actually got a little bit of audio for us here. 3 things here that he talks about. The cost to being a great leader. He talks about 3 different things here. I'll let Kirby talk about it a little bit, and then we'll kind of jump into it here.
Number 1, you will have to make hard decisions that negatively affect people you care about. Number 2, you will be disliked despite your best attempt to do the best for the most. And number 3, you will be misunderstood and won't always have the opportunity to defend yourself. Those are 3 costs that come from being a great leader.
So Kirby talks about it there. 3 different things that it takes to be a leader. One of the big things that kind of stood out to me there, and it is very true, and it's something that we have to understand not only as fans but as media members as well, is not always are you going to be liked. It's not always something that another team or another player or anything like that is going to necessarily like you. They're not necessarily going to always be on the same page as you trying to be a leader for the team, because not everybody has the same exact thought. Not everybody has that same process of, taking on that leadership role and understanding, hey, why are you being hard on me? Why are you, taking this step? You're a great player for sure, but I don't want to listen to you. Sometimes being a great leader, it's a difficult thing to kind of have to do. You're not going to be liked. One of the things that he's talking about there as well. It's true. Again, when you are one of the better players, and you are trying to be a leader and a great leader at that, you're not always going to be liked being in that position, whether it's from another team, whether it's from even players that are on your own team. But when they buy in, that's where you start to get this retention of players. That's where these guys stop leaving for the transfer portal. It's when you have great leaders in place that they start to buy in, and everybody starts to love and like each other as a brotherhood, and everything kind of comes together there. That's when you start to see a true culture that has been built, and that's when you start to see teams forming and sticking together. Again, we're going to talk about something here in just a second that he talked about as well. When it comes to retention, it is 17 of 20 players that were in the COVID class. They have stayed on this team. They haven't left. Again, that's only 3 players out of the 20 that came out of the COVID class that have either left. I guess a couple of them at this point could have graduated and gone on, but 17 of those players are still here. They have been retained and are still on the roster, which is an unbelievable thing to think about, especially as he talked about it more in depth there as well. That's not something you could go around the country and ask anybody else, are they still here? No, these guys are still here because they want to be. There's great leadership here. They're not trying to leave or go and do anything else. So it's big in the retention talk as far as that goes. I want to go back through this clip one more time and listen to it again and just kind of see if we pick up on anything else here.
Number one, you will have to make hard decisions that negatively affect people you care about.
So that's a big deal right there. Number one, having to make hard decisions that negatively affect. So, for example, you have a guy, two best friends that are on a roster. One of these guys is wanting to be a great leader, right? He wants to be a great leader. Another guy isn't necessarily wanting to step up in that role or isn't necessarily wanting to follow along. In the realm of trying to be a great leader, sometimes you're going to have to hurt your friends' feelings. That's all there is to it. Sometimes you're going to negatively affect, just as he said there, the players and your friends that they're not ready to make that step or they're not on the same page as you. You're trying to be a great leader for this team and lead this team to great things as national championships. The past 2 years they've been done. And sometimes your friends aren't going to buy in. And occasionally you're going to have to make the hard decision of not putting down another player, but you're taking next steps to being a great leader. And sometimes your friends kind of get left behind in that. And it's not always fun that way. And I'm not saying this is exact word for word the way that is, but that's something that can happen as well, is you have these guys who are really good friends, and it's like, hey, you got to step up. You got to get better. You got to do this. And sometimes it's harsh. Sometimes it feels like it's a hard thing. But as a great leader, that's what it takes. It doesn't matter if you're my friend. We have to take steps forward in being a better football team, and this is what it takes. You're going to have to step up. I'm going to hurt your feelings here, but you're going to have to step up and be big in this situation. Let's continue with it.
Number two, you will be disliked despite your best attempt to do the best for the most.
Which we talked about that just a little bit a minute ago.
And number three, you will be misunderstood and won't always have the opportunity to defend yourself.
That's kind of the tough one there. You don't always have the opportunity to defend yourself as well. You know, some of that it's just guys that are talking in a locker room or guys that are talking in other spaces that you're not in. You can't defend yourself because a narrative has been talked about you as a leader, and you're trying to, again, to step up in this leadership position and trying to lead your team. And guys are, whether they're criticizing, whether they're judging, whatever the situation is, you can't defend yourself, but yet the conversation continues to happen on something. I don't know. It could be anything. Hey, this guy's trying to lead us. That's probably not the conversation that's had is, can you believe he said this to me? Can you believe he told me I need to step up? And that guy's not there to defend himself, but nonetheless, here you are having to take it, and you get that criticism that kind of comes in, and you can't defend yourself. And that's just part of, like Kirby's saying there, some of the cost that it takes to be a great leader. But if you can get through these few things that he's talking about here, that's where you get these great leaders. These great leaders start to actually step in and be exactly that, great leaders for the team. One kind of crazy and wild thing that I was reading and that Kirby talked about here was Brock Bowers. You talk about a leader who has stepped up in a big way, a big way over the last couple of years, and is continuing that. He comes in as the number one tight end in the country, if not even one of the best wide receivers, even though he's in that tight end room, for the University of Georgia as a great leader and is becoming a better leader. Kirby, he talks about it with the media there, saying if you can get 3 words out of the guy, that's a big challenge for you guys if you guys are able to get 3 words out of Brock in this. But he's stepping into that leadership role, which is an exciting thing to see. I listened to a little bit of what Brock was talking about with some of the other interviews that he had as well. And one of the questions I think was even asked about leadership and him stepping into that position, and it's just different. I think he had even mentioned in there, he used to be one of the younger guys, and all of a sudden, boom, it turns around. Now he's one of the veterans. He's one of the senior guys, even though he's not a senior, he's only a junior. He's one of the older guys on the team now because, when you got these underclassmen or juniors that are leaving, not taking on that senior role, well, all of a sudden, if you're a junior, you're one of the old guys in the room. You're not one of the young guys that's in the room anymore. All of a sudden, you're the one who has to step up and be that leader, and that's a great thing that Brock has started to do. And one of the things Kirby was talking about on there, I didn't get a clip of this, but it was kind of funny to me talking about boxes, running boxes, how Kirby was saying that Brock, some of the younger guys, they wanted to beat Brock. So, they're running around. You're having to run around the entire football field, basically. Brock, you're running the 100-yard dash, and then you can kind of jog around the end zone. But then when you get back to that goal line, it's a 100-yard dash to the other end, and then you could jog. So these young guys decided, okay, well, we're going to line up guys basically on the corner. So Brock runs as hard as he can. He's going here, and all of a sudden he's facing off against a guy who's fresh. And yet Brock is still beating these guys, still beating these young guys in here, which I thought was kind of cool. But that's another thing that it takes being a leader, is being able to stand up, show out, show how good you are, not being boastful, but just like, hey, you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And right now I'm the best. So I'm going to put in my competitive nature, being a great leader, doing everything I can to show you this is what it takes to be great. This is what it takes to be a good leader. So step up to the plate. One of the big things here, complacency and being selfless. Selfless? Yeah. That feels like it's the wrong word, and I'll probably figure it out here in just a minute. But complacency is a big thing right now. And we're about to get into the new mantra of this season. But complacency, and I can understand this to an extent. Again, Georgia has not won a national championship before last year in over 40 years. You win a national championship, that's a huge deal. Huge deal last year that Georgia won it. But then to turn around and do it again, that's an even bigger deal. All of a sudden, you have these guys on the team who have won, not one, but multiple national championships. How do you all of a sudden keep these guys sitting here and go, okay, well, I've got an SEC championship. I've got all these bowl wins and these semifinal championships. I've got national championships. In just 2 years, if you were a freshman last year on this team, you got an SEC championship ring. I can't remember what the bowl ring was last year, the bowl that we played in. I think it was the Sugar Bowl maybe. Then you have the national championship. Could have been wrong about that, but then this year, or technically last year, didn't get the SEC last year, but you got it this year. So semifinal ring, national championship ring last year. This year, SEC championship ring, semifinal ring, national championship. In 2 years, if you're just a sophomore coming in as a junior, Brock Bowers, you have 5 rings on your finger, no problem. Just like that. You've accomplished just about anything that anybody who wants to be in the SEC to accomplish has accomplished. How do you get your team to all of a sudden focus, set in, and say, hey, I understand that you've got all these accolades. I understand that you have all these achievements. It's a new team. You've got young guys in here who have not done this. You have everybody around you and outside of you that is about to make you as good as you can be because you're about to get their best every single week. You're not about to get these little teams that are going to come in and just nip at you a little bit. That's not what's happening. You're about to get your best from every single team that comes to meet you. That's one thing we're going to talk about later on in the show is the scheduling against Georgia. We'll talk about it here in just a little bit. But every single team that you play as a defending national champion, for sure, but a 2-time defending national champion, all of a sudden it's like, hey, we got to knock these guys off of their horse. A couple teams tried to do it last year. Missouri almost got away with it. Ohio State was a field goal away from doing it. Teams are going to give you every single thing that they have to beat you, every single thing. And for these guys who are sophomore juniors that are sitting here going, okay, well, I've accomplished just about everything that I could accomplish in this league, winning the SEC, winning these semifinal games, having 2 national championship rings, you could understand why some of these guys want to leave. The guys that truly love Georgia, the guys who have truly bought in, the guys who know that there are great leaders on this team or are becoming those great leaders, those are the guys who consistently are able to keep other guys here. That's where we start to get into the retention talk, where it's these guys who they don't care that they've won all this. They don't care that they have all these rings. They love the University of Georgia. They want to continue to win. They want to continue to win national championships, no matter how many they can get in a span that they're there, whether it's 3 or 4 years at this one school. They want to stay, and they want to continue to do it. But the biggest thing is for these other guys who are like, hey, I've accomplished everything here. You can't get into that phase where you're just complete. You're cool with everything. Doesn't matter to you. Can't do that. You're not going to be successful if all of a sudden half of your team starts going, it's not a big deal. I've already won all this stuff now. You can't get in that phase. Can't get in that mindset. One of the things Kirby was talking about here, it was kind of funny because right at the beginning of the question, I think the second guy that was questioned, he pops in all of a sudden. He's like, guy says, hey, this other guy was saying that y'all are going to go 7-5. And Kirby just basically acted like he couldn't hear him. And then later on in the conversation, somebody else asked him a question, and he's like, he brings up that 7-5 later. But that's kind of what he's talking to his team. He's like, you guys can't get complacent, but also you got to be selfless. You cannot have selfishness in this game, because if you're being selfish and you're saying, I want these accolades for me, or yada, 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 or you're listening to these outside voices and they're giving you a narrative saying, hey, you're about to be back-to-back-to-back national champions. You're going to be a three-peat. It's no big deal. And you start to buy into all that. Kirby doesn't want that. He doesn't want it. He wants you to understand, hey, these guys, it doesn't matter if these guys are saying that you're going to go 7-5. Don't listen to that. Don't listen to any of that. And that's kind of how it seemed like to me when he heard that guy say, hey, you're going to go 7-5. He was like, what? I didn't hear you. I didn't hear what you said there, even though he refers to it later. After, like, the next question, a couple questions later, he's like, I don't want to hear that. 7-5 is not what I'm going for. So I don't want my team, I don't want my players hearing any of this either, because, again, this outside noise is not something that we want the players hearing. They don't need to hear me. They don't need to hear what I've got to say. Because if I tell them, hey, you about to go, 15-0, no big deal, back-to-back-to-back national champions, all of a sudden they're sitting back and they're going, okay, that seems pretty easy. Well, if they start sitting back saying that's pretty easy, and all of a sudden they get in a game where it's like, wait, this is not as easy, because on the field is completely different than just talking about it. We can sit here and talk about it all day long. I can sit here and write it on a piece of paper, 15-0, easy peasy, no big deal. Don't mean a hill of beans until they get on the field and actually do something about it. So Kirby's trying to make sure these guys are bought in and understand what they're trying to accomplish this season. We talked about retention a little bit. One of the neat things that he was talking about in this was that every single staff member that is on the University of Georgia's in the facility right now is somebody who was on the team last year, who was on the national championship winning team last year. And I know there's some people that are sitting back going, wait a minute, Todd Monken ain't there. It's not what I said. It's not what Kirby said. I'm not the one who said it. Kirby's the one who said it. And it's not what he said either. He didn't say that every single person that was here last year is still here this year. No, he said every person that is on the team this year who is a member of this team, as far as from the facility side goes, again, coaching and all of that, analyst and everything, they have retained every single person that was on that staff last year is still on the staff this year. Yes, there are some guys. Okay, I kind of mixed it up there. There are some guys who have left, yes. But everybody who was on that team last year is still here this year, as far as they haven't brought in anybody new. Okay, I don't know, to be honest with you. Now, the more I talk about it, I'm like, all right, I'm kind of confusing myself on it. But you guys understand it. Everybody who was there last year, most of them guys are here this year. They're not bringing in a bunch of new guys as far as like coordinators in big positions and everything that you're having to learn something new. You still got the same defensive guys there. Mike Bobo was there last year. He was working with Todd Monken some too. So is it going to be a little bit different? Yes. But guess what? They're going to figure it out. I have no doubt about that. Some of the guys, even listening to them, they say that it doesn't seem like there's really much of a difference, that they're not skipping a beat. And that's because Mike Bobo, again, having to work with Todd Monken, you start to kind of figure these things out. You got to keep that thing rocking and rolling too, the same way that Todd had it last year. Don't have to play things exactly the same as Todd did last year. You're not expected to do that. You're not Todd Monken. Got to do your own thing as we kind of come into it now. Now into the mantra that Georgia will follow by this year, and that is better never rests. If you listen to the way that Kirby was talking about it, I can't remember who exactly he was talking about. I followed the team on Twitter. It's like a rugby team that was one of the best, if not still the best rugby team ever as far as winning seasons, winning back-to-back-to-back, all of these championships, all of these accolades that they have. but it's continuing to work and not get complacent when you are in these situations. And their mantra that they took from them is better never rests. Listening to Kirby talk about it and everything, I was like, oh, okay, I kind of understand it. And the more I kind of sat with it after listening to it for a couple of days, I started to think, okay, what exactly does that mean? Let's kind of break this down here. Better never rest. And he kind of did a good job of that in the conference as well. And I know a lot of what I'm talking about you've already heard, and you're just going to kind of hear my piece on it or my opinions in it as we kind of walk through it, diving deeper into it. But better never rest. Okay. You're already better. You're the best team in the country. You have been for the past 2 years, proving that in national championship teams. But to get better, you can't rest. And it falls back to talking about that even though at the time it was a joke and it was funny to talk about with Brock Bowers and these younger guys in that tight end room trying to compete against Brock Bowers, and instead of again, one guy just going one-on-one with them, they realize, hey, we can't win this, so we're going to put a guy on each corner and essentially cut it in half and try to beat him, and still could not do that. And that's because better never rests. Brock Bowers is the best tight end on this team, the best tight end in the country, creating himself as almost one of the best wide receivers in the country as a tight end because he is the best. But he does not rest on that. He continues to try to get better every single day. Because if the best one in the country all of a sudden decides to lay down and take a nap, somebody is going to surpass you. Somebody is going to get better than you. So better never rest. You can't rest. You can't rest as the best team in the country. You have to continue to try to get better and better and better and better. And this is where we're going to kind of talk about this. You know, the conversation was brought up about hazing over at Northwestern and Pat Fitzgerald. They got fired there for the hazing incident there. Don't enjoy that. Don't like that. Listening to a lot that was going on there. I'm not going to dive into all that because that's not Georgia. That's not what's going on here. But listening to what Kirby Smart said here is so smart, no pun intended, but it really kind of opened my eyes up to it too, where it's like, this is true. Because listening to Kirby talk about how when he was at the University of Georgia and he was hazed, and the way that he was hazed is, hey, you shave your head, you got to carry this guy's bags, essentially, right? And it's like, okay, that's simple. And to Kirby, he even said at that time, you know, that's pretty tough. That's pretty tough to have to deal with that. And I understand that if you're having to get your head cut and everything. But I loved hearing this from Kirby talking about the team now, the fact that, first of all, he has 2 meetings a year, and he himself runs these meetings to let everybody know, hey, this means a lot to me, and I want to make sure you guys are hearing me and understanding me. But the fact that he said this, and it makes so much sense, and I never thought about this before as far as it goes, because we all talk about, you know, little things that you do like totem pole. This even happens at work in certain situations, and I've seen it, been a part of it. Not a big deal. When you're at the bottom of the totem pole, you have duties that you have to fulfill until you start to work up that totem pole. And occasionally you have a little jawing back and forth, and it's all light and playful. We're not doing what was going on at other places. That's a whole nother ball game. Again, we're not going to dive deep into that. That is ridiculous. But what we're talking about here is small little things where it's kind of like that. Hey, you got to carry my bags. You're a freshman. You know, you got to learn your place in not only this world, but on this team. You carry my bags. And one of the things Kirby said in here was, you guys don't understand. Some of these freshmen that we've got coming in now, they have to play. So if all of a sudden you have these graduates or these seniors or even juniors that are about to walk out the door, if all of a sudden you've got these guys that are jawing down on these little freshmen that are coming in, and these are guys who have to play, and you're supposed to be a leader, but you're saying, hey, you do this, you do that, yada, yada. You know, you're trying to kind of point your finger or crack the whip at somebody. It's like, hey, how are you going to have good morale with a guy who has to play, not necessarily because he's the only guy there, but he is good enough that he is going to play. And all of a sudden you have a junior or a senior that's cracking down on him and just bringing his morale down. That doesn't work. Not in this facility, not in this situation here at Georgia, which is one good thing to hear that Kirby was talking about. Again, the culture that is built at the University of Georgia right now, it is in such a good place that I hope, just like we talked about off the start, live in this moment because Georgia is in such a good place right now. We're not even going to dive into what's going on with the AJC and all that because that's its own entity that can be a show in and of itself, and I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it right here. I don't know if I'll do it in the future, but we're not talking about it. We're not going to bring it down here. But just listening to a lot that Kirby was talking about, and again, yes, you're getting coach speech. You're getting a lot of the stuff that you're naturally going to get from a coach before we get into a season. It's talking season. Kirby's not going to give you anything big that another team can either pick up and run with or that he himself regrets looking back on going, man, why did I say that? Man, why did I give this insight? Why did I do that? That's not what you're going to get in this situation. But what you did get from Kirby, man, it fires me up. It fires me up. It gets me ready to rock and roll and just, boom, smash through a wall as we get ready for the season. 44 days. We still got a long way to go. And finally kind of wrapping up on some of the stuff that we've got here. Kirby talking about, I can't even talk here at the end of this, but Kirby kind of talking and touching a little bit on the scheduling for this season. Hilarious reading this. Somebody asked him, people are talking about how the schedule may be a little bit easy this year. I even saw a tweet earlier. This guy took a picture of a cupcake and said, oh, look, it's Georgia's schedule here. And I love it. Kirby's just like, come play it. If it's so easy, come play it. And there was somebody that put up a composite, like percentages of all of these top teams, what it would take, like the percentages of these top teams. I'll find the thing and maybe retweet it on Twitter or something. For these top teams to win in the same scheduling format that Georgia has, not very many teams look to be that successful in the same situation. I think the highest I think at the time was like Ohio State, and that's not necessarily a big percentage either. I think it was like 36, 38%. I could be wrong about that. I need to look back and see exactly what it is. But I love it. Kirby's like, come on, come play it. If you think it's that easy, come play it. Because I promise you, it's not going to be all that easy. That's where we'll kind of leave things today. We're going to kind of keep it, again, this is generally around that 30-minute mark is where I try to leave it. Once a week is what we're going to work on right now until we get to season, and then you guys know that we're going to double it up and go to twice a week. So some of the upcoming stuff that we've got to talk about. Big thing is SEC rankings. I do have my SEC rankings that I've actually put in already here. Not going to tweet about that. I'm going to save that probably for next week. Preseason ratings. Listen, preseason rankings don't matter at all. Me and Hunter have talked about this many a time. Preseason rankings do not matter because when the season starts, everything starts to change immediately. So don't matter necessarily off the start. But nonetheless, I've put the teams that I think how will finish by the end of the season because that's what we do in talking season. We find stuff to talk about. And speaking of Hunter, here in probably a week or two, here in just a couple of weeks, we're going to have him back on for part 2 of the off-season talking season with Hunter, and we've got a bunch of fun stuff to talk about there. We've talked about it's kind of funny when we did our top 5 quarterbacks in that talk, and if you guys hadn't heard that one, make sure you guys go back and listen to the top 5 quarterbacks. In our opinions, again, it's not necessarily who is actually the top 5 quarterbacks in the University of Georgia. Everybody has their own opinion on that, but we talked about then that we're going to do our Mount Rushmore of just Georgia players over all of the years. Doesn't matter how far you want to go back, how soon you want to make it. But it was just kind of wild just a couple of weeks after we talked about that. All of a sudden, University of Georgia comes out, Mount Rushmore of them. And I was like, all right, evidently somebody's listening there, which is, not really because why they're listening to me. But regardless, that's one thing we're going to have coming up is that part 2 there with Hunter, and we'll go through our Mount Rushmores. We got season predictions coming. We got quarterback running back room talk coming, wide receivers, tight ends, defense. We've got all of the stuff to talk about because it is talking season. So, again, glad to have you guys here and excited for everything that we've got coming up here over the next couple of weeks. But you guys make sure that you follow us on Twitter at Dawg Talk 20. All of the things, Instagram, Patreon, all of the good stuff that we have there. Just follow the links in the description below. Again, we will check in with you guys next week on another episode here. Just glad to be back at it here. Season 4 of Dawg Talk. We'll check in with you guys when that time comes. Go Dogs.